Hello and welcome to our talk on Cloud SIEM and beyond, leveraging Sumo across security operations, threat hunting, IT operations, and more. I'm Heath Hendrickson, Senior Security Architect at the Clorox company. I'm joined with my colleague, Gary Connor, Senior Threat Protection Lead. Welcome to our talk at Illuminate 2020. Let me give you a little background on Clorox for those that may not be familiar with the name, because I know we're joined by some international individuals who may not be familiar with Clorox as a brand name. Clorox is a leading CPG company, consumer packaged goods, with a whole number of different brands under the umbrella. And here's a slide showing most of our major brands that you might see in different markets, everything from Burt's Bees to Poet to Kingsford Charcoal, Glad trash bags. As a background, Clorox is a $6 billion global CPG company. We have operations in 25 plus countries, approximately 8,800 employees across 83 plus sites. As part of our journey into Cloud SIEM, we came from a managed security provider who provided a SIEM as part of their service. When that contract was up, we wanted to look for a modern SIEM that could more flexibly meet our needs and requirements. As part of that, we identified some leading providers in the space and undertook doing a 30+ day proof of concept with those vendors. The key thing for our POC was we put live production data into it. I didn't want to act on some canned set of data that wouldn't necessarily see things and wasn't real. We made sure to put the exact same data into the different platforms that we were evaluating so we could do a true head-to-head comparison between them. We ended up selecting Sumo Logic. We had the Sumo Logic Cloud SIEM Enterprise solution with, we put approximately 250 gigabytes per day of data into the solution. It's geared for 12 months of data storage, and we also subscribe to the Sumo Logic SpecOps service. And just for a quick background on the Clorox computing environment, for those that want to be able to compare it with their own environment, we have approximately 1,400 to 1,500 Windows servers, ranging everywhere from 2003 all the way up to 2019. We have about 300 Linux servers in the environment. We do have direct internet access at every one of those 83 locations globally with a firewall at each of those sites. And we have about 7,500 PCs, mostly laptops, predominantly Windows, with about 200 Macs in the environment. And as I said earlier, 33 manufacturing plants globally. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Gary Connor to talk about the main use case that started our journey down Cloud SIEM, which was using it as a security tool. Gary?
Thanks, Heath. And thanks everybody for attending our session. Your time is greatly appreciated, and we hope that this is beneficial to you. As Heath said, we came from a SIEM that was hosted by a managed security services provider. And moving away from that, we had a lot of lessons learned about what we didn't want in a SIEM and what we were really looking for. And that's how we got started down this path and pulling in all of our production data, whether it was next-gen antivirus, our EDR solution, single sign-on, the firewall logs, server logs, cloud services log, web proxy logs, getting all this data into Sumo. That wasn't the hard part. The hard part was after it was in the platform of what do we do with it? Because what we learned was just because you have the data doesn't mean you understand the data. And we started going through and seeing that the data didn't necessarily always match what we thought it would. For example, our network threat detection platform, in its logs, it has two different scores for a file that it thinks is suspicious. One of those scores is a preliminary score, and then the second score was the actual post-processing after it had done all of its examination and figured out what it was going to do with it, was the final score. Well, the initial default rules were looking at the initial score, not the post-process score. So we had a lot of effort put into tuning the rules and understanding our data. The default rules were a great starting point, and they gave us some ideas, but we spent a lot of time with the Sumo team creating custom rules for single sign-on events for international users that could show up logging in from multiple countries in a short time frame. Doing the rule prototyping was great for us once that was available, because one of the things that happened, we had created an initial rule that generated about 2,500 insights in a matter of about an hour. So once the prototyping was available, that was a great addition for us. But these things, it was all learning and it was valuable. So after we got the rules tuned, then we started adding additional data, threat intelligence sources. One of the things to be aware of with threat intelligence is more is not necessarily better. We did have one threat intelligence feed that we were using that was generating so much data, and it was so poor quality that we had to turn it off because it was just generating a lot of noise that we had to deal with. So then we started focusing on the quality of the threat intelligence feeds instead of the quantity of the data. So now we've got multiple feeds from known good sources, and they're providing a lot of value from an enrichment perspective. Also developing the match list so that you know you've identified known good IP addresses, known good systems, things that you really want to make sure that are built into the rules and that are known and that you can develop additional information from. We also did custom insights, and because it wasn't always that we wanted a rule, an insight triggered off of several things. We had some situations. One of these was printers that are using an embedded version of Windows 7 are susceptible to WannaCry and WannaCrypt. So how did we detect those? You can't put a next-gen antivirus solution on them. So we were finding those through firewall event logs where they were trying to reach out to the internet on port 445. So we developed a custom insight that if we saw multiple connections from a single IP going to the internet that were blocked on that port, that was something that we needed to investigate. So using all of this, we started getting some really good results, really good details, and it helped us tune our insights down to the point where we weren't getting hundreds per day. It's down to a point now that it's a manageable volume for us, and it's a realistic volume. So with the event correlation and these insights pulling data across multiple days, multiple systems, where we might see an event from our web service, our web proxy, where a file has been downloaded to a user system, but nothing happens from there. But 2 days later, the user decides to open that file. Well, now we've got the events from our antivirus, our EDR, plus the events from the web proxy. So we're starting to see data across an extended time frame and across multiple technologies. This is a very different environment from us coming from the MSSP platform where everything was single event driven. There was no correlation. There was no time frame other than just the immediate, hey, this event happened, you need to deal with it, whether it was a false positive or a real event or not. So this was a great addition for us of having that context and having that additional data. We've also seen a lot of insights that are based off of anomaly detection, not just, hey, this rule fired because it's known malware. This rule fired because of a sequence of events that led up to something that looks really, really suspicious, like PowerShell calling a command prompt to run a script that's using base64 encoding to hide itself. These are the types of things that we're finding, and that normally you would miss if you don't have the right structure and the right tools and the right processes to detect them. But the SIEM wasn't the only thing. So as we started working through the SIEM, getting it tuned and getting it to where we wanted it, we also were working with the dashboards and the reporting and developing multiple dashboards, multiple technologies feeding into these dashboards. So one of our big focuses was getting a threat management dashboard that had all the threat information that we were interested in, whether it was from our next-gen antivirus, our web proxy, our network threat detection solution, all of these technologies feeding into a single dashboard in a single place where we could see it. And then those top-level elements on the dashboard, being able to click through those to go down deeper into individual things, such as the web proxy or the next-gen antivirus, to see what's happening and what's actually going on with those technologies and the alerts that we're seeing from them. We also built out dashboards for our management. And the dashboards for management, they present a monthly view of what's happening across specific technologies that we report up to our executive management on. This has saved us an enormous amount of time because now we're not running reports that cover a month and then trying to assemble things and put them together into a format that makes sense. We have the data, the managers can go to these screens, click on a button, they have the data they want, and it's real-time data. Or they can look at historical data going back as far as we're keeping data for a year, so they can go back through all that data and see on a daily, weekly, monthly basis of what has been going on and the improvements that we've made, the protections that we've put in place, the types of things that are interesting from a management perspective. And then we've also used these dashboards to find the needles in the haystacks. And I say haystacks because it's not just one haystack, that'd be too easy. Everything's its own individual little haystack. And these screenshots show our threat management dashboard drilling down into something. And then by the time you get down to the real data, the real important data, if you look at the screenshot in the bottom right of the presentation, there's a big pink spike over on the right-hand side. This is not something that you would ever see looking through individual logs. It was a one-time event. A user had downloaded a toolbar for Google that happened to be a brand new crypto mining toolbar. And that was the set of events that triggered in our web proxy because it did have enough sense to block that. Finding things like this is super simple. You start with the big chunk of data, start eliminating things that you don't care about or you know what they are, and it will give you a picture of the stuff that you need to really look at and really be concerned with. And this has been a boon for us because it has helped us eliminate over 90% of the malware in our environment. It has helped us reduce things happening with our web proxy, not just malicious things, but it's helped us find things that we were blocking that we weren't aware of, and to identify those things and actually enable them. So websites that were being blocked unintentionally, we've been able to open those back up. Applications on workstations and servers that were being inadvertently blocked, we've identified those, been able to unblock those, and it's added a lot of stability to the environment. So the uses go beyond just security, which was something that we discovered as we were going through our initial stand up and our initial deployment of this, and we started expanding it. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Heath to spend a little bit of time talking about what we've done from not just the security side, but how we've leveraged that data and what we're doing from a non-security perspective. So with that, back to you, Heath.
Thanks, Gary. And as you said, right, our use of the SIEM goes beyond the traditional security use cases, right? As Gary was talking about building these custom dashboards for management, for operations and other things, which I'm showing some of them here, where it allows us to combine all that data into one place. So instead of an analyst looking at multiple places to try and find patterns, to try and find data, they can see it all in one place. But even beyond that, as you start looking at those operational use cases within the environment, you start to be able to do things that you couldn't do before. What I'm showing here are a couple of screenshots of what we've built for custom dashboards and custom searches and queries in the system. On the left is actually something that we comically put together because we kept getting asked in the Clorox environment by the networking team, is the firewall up at a site? So we were able to very quickly put together a really quick page that just gave a very quick answer of, is it up or not? As we expanded upon that, we were able to pull custom metrics into the system through log to metrics conversions to be able to give us ideas on latency of a firewall, or is it dropping packets as we do ping tests and things like that. So these were things that we were able to very quickly add, customized, not out of the box, but because the platform had that ability, we quickly threw things together. All the way to things on the right-hand side, which we've made really good use out of, which are the ability to schedule a search and trigger an alert based on the outcome. On the far right, you see an email. What we had put together was a simple scheduled search that runs on a daily basis using Sumo Logic's outlier capability to tell us when do events on a given firewall deviate from what we had seen the week before. The flexibility here is we needed to look for the week before, not the day before. So what this actually does is compares, say, Monday traffic to a Monday a week ago and gives us an overview to say, have the events exceeded a particular standard deviation. So like we pick the amount of that, and it gives us a quick indicator of, is something maybe going on at a site or a firewall that we need to look into? Not anything specific that I could ever build a rule to look for, because this is general across all traffic and all events at the site. Very powerful for us to quickly get a handle on something and even start looking, as Gary talked about, for those needles in a haystack. This helps us find those haystacks, so then we can start drilling in to find the needles. Even beyond that, as I said early on, we did our proof of concept, and I didn't tell you when. We actually started doing our proof of concept in February of this year. So right as COVID-19 started hitting, we were doing this proof of concept and evaluation with all of our production data. So as everybody got the work at home orders, one question came out from us and from management to figure out, how well is our remote access environment doing? I was able to take the data that we had in from our firewalls and our VPN firewalls, very quickly put together a quick dashboard for it, both for operations and for executive management, to get a quick view on how many people are using it, when are they using it, how are the sites doing for our entry points, things like that, that became a very quick tell to make sure that it was running good, so that we could start proactively looking at things instead of waiting for users to call in and report about performance issues. This particular screenshot actually was very helpful early on, in that it helped us identify a misconfiguration within our environment that was directing people to a non-optimal VPN entry point. It would have caused performance issues. We were able to find that before anybody even opened a ticket about it, and fix it before anyone knew any different. Even going beyond that, as we said early on in IT operations, when we start looking at operational aspects, these are a few quick searches and graphs that were put together to help track progress of a deployment of multi-factor authentication within our environment. So as we were rolling out multi-factor, we wanted to keep track of how were users enrolling in multi-factor, how many users, what factors were they enrolling, and what were they actually using. Those are the two graphs on the left. And again, speaking to those scheduled searches and alerts, quickly put together a search based on a very specific event that's not security relevant. Right? It's an event in our system that tells us when somebody's trying to access an application, but that requires multi-factor authentication, but they don't have it set up. Right? So this is a great service desk help, because now we can get a clear indicator early on that somebody might need some help, or might be calling into the service desk with a problem. And so we can find out about those things before the person even picks up the phone and calls. And the last example that I'm going to highlight here as we go through this is, how do we take what would ordinarily be complex, right? On the left, you see what's normal for doing Sumo logic query, right? It's a pretty complex query with parsing data and searches and all sorts of things, and very quickly take that and turn it into something that I can turn over to a level 1 service desk person to find information quickly. This particular example helps our service desk when somebody calls in and says, hey, my account's locked out. What's going on? It keeps getting locked out. They can go into here, put in the username, put in a date range, hit a button, and it quickly will return all the different devices and reasons why their account's been locked out over that time range. So they can very quickly drill into, oh, hey, do you happen to have a Samsung phone? You've been using that to connect to the wireless, and you haven't updated the password on it. It's locking out your account. Very quickly helping the service desk to resolve users' problems that in the past took a long time to do. So in closing, I'll give you a few kind of wrap-ups on what Gary and I talked about. Number one, it's not just about capturing the data. It's about making sure that you get all the data that you need. Don't be afraid to experiment. Put the data into the system, start pulling it apart, see what's in there. If it doesn't turn out to be useful, it's really quick to turn it off, right? And so this makes it great to be able to put something in, see if there's value, both from an operations or from a security perspective, without committing to it in the long term. And as Gary said earlier, learn about your data, right? Knowing what's in the data is critical to being able to actually get value out of it. Spend time understanding what the fields in there mean, how the different records and attributes relate to each other, so that as you go forward and look to put together either correlation rules or searches or queries, you know what to look for. And the last thing is, think outside the box. right? As you start looking at this, as you start capturing the data, both the security teams and operational teams can drive a lot of value out of solutions like this once you get the data into it. Make sure to involve them early. So as Gary and I come from the security side, we make sure to engage our operational colleagues to, to look into the platform, to use the platform to help themselves with the data. But if you're coming from an operations side, make sure to reach out to your security colleagues. They're going to find a lot of value in this solution, especially when you combine the Cloud SIEM Enterprise and the continuous intelligence platform components together. It makes for a really great combination. That's it, and thank you for attending our talk.